welcome back to another episode of Tales of Agmar. I'm your host and creator, Sinjin, and we will be going into our second dive of characters this week. It's going to sound like last week. Again, I just do this because writing is going to be repetitive. It is also competitive, and you will be doing this again and again, as well as any other storytelling format, right? But the idea is to keep sparking and getting your mind twisting and turning to where you can start asking yourself the hard questions that really get you to build the story that you want to tell. Now, some more announcements. Don't forget to check the book out on Wattpad, Ream, and Royal Road. It's available for free on all three of those platforms. We're not charging anything. If anyone, for whatever reason, is charging you to read Tales of Agmar at this time, they should not be, because I've yet to find a publisher. You guys will know once I find a publisher and once the whole story will be revealed. But anyways, we're running to chapter 30-ish on there. I say 30-ish because we may go a little bit past, or I may add a little bit more, just to give you guys enough story that you're like, okay, it's good. I feel like I can wait a second while we find a publisher. Also, if you randomly know a publisher somehow, or a publishing agent, you should send them my email, which, as one might expect, is the name of the cast, all in lowercase, at gmail.com. But anyways, I'm not going to say that just because I don't want a bunch of bots. So sorry, you'll have to kind of dig for it, but it's there. Trust me. You can also just come jump in the Discord and tell me that they exist and be like, yeah, if you just email them here, then you'll find them, right? Possibly also let me know if they're looking for anything or if they just want me to email them. But, right, Discord, it's free. Come jump in. If you want to support Tales of Agmar and our efforts to grow both on social media and through life in general, just trying to actually get all of this content out there and have this is a massive world. We're talking like huge scale. I have so many things I want to do and not enough time in my jam-packed days trying to earn a living to do it. So any help there helps me be able to focus a little bit more on Tales of Agmar here. But that's the main goal of the Ko-fi at this time. It also helps us pay for artists, which is kind of the big way. How we're doing that now is picking up artists and contracting them for little bits of art. But finally, if you're new to the cast, this is dropping every Monday at at 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Now, let's get into some more character writing. So, this week's big idea, the big thing we're focusing on, is your reader should come away feeling something after learning more about your characters. Okay, so we talked about in the past how like after like a scene, they should feel something. We've talked about how your characters should feel livable, but now we're getting into a little bit more of that emotional connection between your reader and this character, okay? This, I would argue, is one of the biggest points in fiction where it's like, if a real big part of your audience can't really feel like they connect to your character on an emotional level, you're going to lose a lot of your audience. So you kind of have to know who you're writing, who you're storytelling for. For instance, if your character is really overpowered and does everything automatically right off the beat, you are going to lose touch with a good majority of your audience, right? If your character was swinging around a staff previously and switches to a sword because it's a sharper weapon and swings a sword around, even if they swing it around haphazardly, if they are defeating people that are actually trained, even if that person is really angry, consumed by some dark force that makes them act kind of crazily or whatever, the trained individual, assuming that they can still access their training, should be able to win more of the sword fights than the untrained individual. Okay? Okay. Now, you can use real life examples to kind of be like, oh, like, that wouldn't work because we've had times when untrained forces combated, trained forces, and the trained forces didn't adapt. That's my key word here. They didn't adapt. Okay. If your trained person doesn't adapt their training to meet the situation, that's on them. Okay. It could just be like a big, massive government right? Like a universe-spanning government that doesn't really change it because they're like, it works. And if it don't work, we're just going to dump more people into the problem until it works. If that's what they do, that's what they do, right? Have them keep doing that. If your character is a highly trained individual that trained under another highly trained individual, but then they can't do anything because they're quote unquote a crybaby, I'd be worried about how they were professionally trained in the first place and how they survived that. Now you can say things like, oh, like they weren't because they didn't. Okay, sweet. Why did the new guy pick them up then? What's their big power that's helping them going? Okay? Okay. And then another thing that I have, another problem. If your character has some sort of life-saving thing that they can do, and they decide, hey, I'm gonna save this space slug in the ground because it's like, oh no, it's dying. I feel so bad for it. I'm gonna save it. And then they kiss the main bad guy that they've been having this weird on and off romance relationship with, and he dies right after. I'm pretty sure your character is a vampire, and you should get that checked out. If you want them to be a vampire, tell into them being a vampire. If you don't want them to be a vampire, then give me some good explanation of why they weren't able to do what they just did a few pages ago. Now, okay? That's it, right? This kind of keeping with this whole thing of like characters being characters. If they don't want to save the big bad guy because they just don't want to, they're just like, I just want him to die because he annoys me, have them say it after. Just be like, I never liked him anyways. Even if it messes up everything else, we'll just have to assume that she just didn't want to save him. Anyways, now that's over and my monitors are turning into more of a fireplace than a monitor, let's keep going. Before we get into more of last week, let's talk about what we will call one of my other biggest gripes. So we kind of talked about, I guess we talked about this a little bit recently. Characters that just do stuff. I like there to be a reason behind at least 75 to 80% of the things that happen. You don't have to have a reason for why your character eats breakfast in the morning. I'm just going to assume they're eating breakfast because it's time to eat breakfast, right? But if they are constantly going out of their way to save random people, unless that's like your character's thing, and that's like not established by the time they're saving random person number 10, then we need to know kind of why. Right? Do they only save certain kinds of people? Can they only see certain kinds of people and that's the people they save? That sort of thing, right? If they're just kind of letting everyone die except for like the group of characters around them, we need to know that too. Okay? So, right, and that's just because as a person, we usually don't do something for nothing. Robot, on the other hand, that's not a human, will just kind of do something because it's their programming. So that's kind of what helps you create a character that feels more human and feels less human. It's kind of based off of a little bit more of their motivations of why they're doing things instead of just doing things to do things. Also works really great when you have a regime that's into brainwashing. Your brainwashed individuals can just do things consistently all the time, and you just say that, and we can kind of infer that there's a degree of brainwashing, or at least a high rate of conditioning that happens within that population that forces people to be that way. And that could be something your character explores, right? Maybe they start out that way, but they don't finish that way in your story. We got to know the difference between your character and the NPCs. Okay. So, got some different levels of emotion going on. We've got a little bit more chat with that. Let's talk about more NPCs, specifically expendables, okay? So that expendable that dies on page 1, right? Obviously, he doesn't need to have a reason to die. The characters may not even freak out about him dying. Maybe they didn't know him that well. That's okay, all right? They've got to react based off of the information they know still, all right? They still got to react like a human. They can be sad that someone passed, but maybe given their backstory, they're used to so many people of that kind of type passing because they're expendables, that they start making offhand comments about it and realize, as they're going on, like, oh, this regime I'm a part of is really not that human at the end of the day. Okay, like kind of explore that. You don't have to tell us that, But as a reader, I should be able to find that out through what you have your characters say and do. Okay, now, for instance, also another note about expendables, you don't need to write a backstory for every single expendable. Sometimes, as authors, you can get distracted by that and be like, I need to give everyone names. Not everyone needs names. You can just call them Expendable 1 and Expendable 2 and Expendable 3 all the way up to Expendable, X or Y, depending on how high you need to go, and just only assign certain ones names that need certain names. Totally, totally fine. Okay? However, right, there's always those howevers. If this expendable is going to come back and have some story for some other, minor or major character that comes in that becomes really important later, give them a name. Give them a name, maybe have your character know their name, or find out their name in that scene, and then just kind of let it pass them by. Okay? Then bring that person up later, like Captain Bill, right? Captain Bill gets taken out. He was part of the Expendables. Main character goes, gosh darn it, that sucks. Captain Bill's dead. But we got to move on, right? Captain Bill's daughter can roll up later and be like, why'd you let my father die? And then that becomes a whole thing. And we get this whole problem where now your character has an existential crisis because it's like, oh, why did I let Captain Bill and all those other die? How many of those other people left families? I should save their families. That kind of thing, right? Like, whatever your world needs, make sure your characters have the backstory to support it, including minor characters. So, last week, we talked more about what goes into making a character, but we need to talk a little bit more about the reader side of this. As when we're writing, we need to not forget that someone else is going to come and read this in the future. Again, that whole idea of, write like you have an audience already. Write like someone's going to be reading this, that they've been waiting for it for ages, and that once they read it, they're going to love it. And then also during the editing process, make sure that they love it, especially your characters. Hence why we're talking about characters. Okay? And those ups and downs, as well as those things that go sideways in a story, are going to be what pulls your reader base in. They're going to be what helps your story feel alive, helps your character feel like they're actually making choices, because if every choice either succeeds or fails badly, we have a problem, because now your character is either succeeding or failing badly every single time. If your character fails successfully or successfully fails, we need to know, right? We've got to know if something's working or if something is not working for your character, how your character is going to fix it, see your character try to fix it, and watch them fail or not. And we should be almost biting our fingernails off the whole time, because if we're not, then it might not be that exciting. There is also obviously times, right, when people aren't going to be, needing to bite their fingers off. They're just going to have to be like, I feel like so-and-so can do this. And so-and-so does it. And they do it again. 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 And then book 3 comes around. And it's like, yeah, so he did the thing that he's always done, but it didn't work this time. Right now we're like, oh, okay, something's different. Now tell us why it's different. Okay? We've got to know why all of a sudden this situation was different. Maybe the bad guy got better at whatever it is, right? Maybe the whole time the bad guys were actually baiting him into a trap, and now they've hit the trap, they've sprung it, and they're stuck there, okay? Maybe their teammate, which has been their teammate for so long, is now no longer their teammate, and they've fallen into a trap, and now your character has to kind of figure that out and deal with the trap. So, those are good things to work with character-wise, and then mostly just like storytelling-wise. I'm not going to sit here and like tell you guys how to format character notes either, because I feel like it's going to be different for each reader, right? You're going to want different things because that's how you tell your story. And so feel free to go make it. But of course, if for whatever reason you guys need some sort of launch pad for like creating a character, I would be down for making like a character sheet, just like answer some questions to help you start, but not to, force you to finish. Because, I'm not really writing this to feel like a course lecture or anything like this. I'm writing this as a author to other authors, a new author speaking to other new authors, where it's like a, hey, also kind of like a mild wake up call, like a, hey, remember, you tell your own stories. Nobody else does. Don't let anyone else tell your story. You just tell how you want to tell it. You don't need to use anyone else's story to tell it. you can tell it yourself. And we the standard caveat with the whole fan fiction thing. I know people write fan fictions and they have a really good time with fan fictions and experimenting with those characters. That can be a good kind of how we did last week, using those characters as a case study to learn a little bit more about characters and how they work and kind of dissect your favorite author or author's characters. But when you really go and you write your own story, you should be writing your own characters. You should make them feel like your own characters. And again, that's my opinion. If you prefer something else, that's totally cool. There's going to be people that want whatever you're writing. You're going to find them. I'm just, my big thing here is to try to encourage people to write the next big thing, right? Obviously, I'm super biased, and I say that Tales of Agmar is going to be one of the next big things, but there's always room for other next big things, other huge things that will take off and will be really exciting and will group a fan base around them that will follow it for years to come. But the first thing is you got to write, you got to build the characters, right? What's one of the things that makes us keep coming back to, for instance, like Lord of the Rings? It was, aside from the expansive world building, there's also these characters that just fit the setting. They feel alive in the setting. Okay, the setting feels alive because of the characters. So that's where we're going, right? We're going for this. My world needs to feel lived in. It needs to feel like things can happen in my world. The characters and supporting cast around them, minor characters and NPCs, is how that happens. Okay, now, just to tie this all back to the beginning, your writer should feel things. Sorry, not your writer. Your reader should feel things while they read. If you are reading your story and you are not feeling like it's pulling you along, or feeling like, you're not sad, or at least just a little bit sad when you kill off Tim after reading him for the 100th time, then we need to know, right? Like you need to be like, okay, like this doesn't hit as hard. I didn't build it up enough beforehand. I didn't make him react in ways that people liked him or her, right? And then do that. Go back, change those things, change it to where the reader now really has to like Tim, falls in love with Tim, gets so attached to Tim that when he doesn't make it at the end, we're like, dang. Or for instance, right? We don't always think about these things being objects, but inanimate objects, or even like dogs, right? It can be sad when a dog dies, but when you watch like a dog movie, they spend the entire movie telling you how awesome the dog is, how wonderful the dog is, why everyone loved the dog, why the main character just adored the dog, couldn't live without the dog, right? Sorry. It's going to take me a moment to remember my dog. But then it hits the end, and we're like, dang, I am so sad that dog is gone. I don't know if I can emotionally recover from that dog passing. And the dog could just be a dog actor, right? That's what we need in this story. If for instance it's a pencil and your character feels devastated over the pencil, we need the backstory on the pencil to your character. Okay, if your character carries around like a stuffed, I don't know, whatever, like maybe they always eat a bag of chips, okay, and one time the bag of chips they're eating just explodes, or it's like vaporized, or it's empty, right? We need to feel the emotional stress of the now non-existent chips and chip bag by extension. Okay, that's where we're gonna end. I'm gonna stop ranting about characters. I could rant about this all day. I was hanging out with my brother-in-law and just ranted to him about tons of, what I consider flaws in other people's stories, and I think that can be a really great way to encourage you to write stories. Is when you're out here and you're like, hey, like I didn't like what they did there. Remember that when you're going into your story. Remember how you wish they explained just a little bit more so you felt more emotional attachment when that happened, or how you wish like maybe so and so was just a vampire the whole time. And so instead of only using 3 books on it, you got to write a 4th book now where they're actually a vampire, but no one else knows. And then we really just dig into the fact that they're a vampire or whatever. Again, it's your story. You experiment with how you want to. You write the story that speaks to you. So, thanks for listening to the end, everyone. Continue listening past all of this, past the outro music, just support the cast. It helps us out so much. We'll be back next week with another episode in this mini series talking about putting history into your world, right? That history is going to add another chunk, another dimension of your world where it feels lived in. And it's going to have tons of advice, possibly like some jump points, launch points to help you truly craft a world that feels lived in by your characters and by all the minor characters, because those people really bring, when you like build those cultures, build those factions, the small people in those factions really helps bring that to life. Till then, this has been Sinjin with Tales of Agmar, and wherever you are, be a good one.